Gold. Oh, it's so pretty. Should you buy it on finance? Should you take out a loan to buy as much gold as possible with the premise that that loan might be worthless if currencies collapse, or that you just might get more return than the interest and the cost of the loan itself? Yeah, no, don't do it at all. And this is why. Hello everybody, Backyard Bullion here, and a very warm welcome to you all joining me for another Precious Metal Ramble. I was asked the other day whether or not it would be a good idea to borrow £10,000 in a loan over 4 years and use that money right now to buy as much gold as possible. The example was best value sovereigns, but any gold I guess would do. However, I am not a fan of borrowing to buy gold and silver. I think it's a recipe for disaster and something that I feel quite strongly that people really shouldn't do. Now, that said, I'm not a professional financial advisor. I'm just a guy who talks about gold and silver here on the internet. I would highly recommend that if you're considering borrowing money to buy gold and silver, that you actually go and speak to a professional financial advisor. But what I can and have done on this channel for many years is talk generally about some of the things that I have observed within the world of gold and silver and what I think might be a good or bad idea. So we're going to talk a little bit about that here today. I do want to present both sides of the argument, although I can tell you right now that I fall on the side of not borrowing cash to buy gold and silver. There are potentially a few advantages to doing so. That said, I really don't think it's a good idea. So we're going to dive in and talk all about that. I'd love to know your opinions as we go throughout this video, so please feel free to comment down below. And if you have not subscribed to our channel and you like our content, then hit subscribe. And don't forget to hit the like button as well. Right, that's all that YouTube-y stuff out of the way. Borrowing to buy gold and silver. Now, the example that was presented to me was a £10,000 loan across 4 years with repayments of approximately £233 a month. Now, I did the maths, and that works out to be a total repayment of £10,200. So about £2,000 it would cost you to have that loan. Now, essentially what's going on here is that you are front-loading an investment in gold. You are taking out that cash, you're putting it all in gold, and you're betting that gold will do better over that 4 years than it would have done if you bought slowly over time, perhaps. Now, in principle, there is possibility there for a profit. It's not unreasonable to think that perhaps gold and silver might, or gold especially, might go up by the 20% that the loan has cost you. You know, it's not impossible, but when you look at the fact that gold right now is at a pretty high that hasn't really been matched over the last 5 or 6 years of absolute tumultuous events in the world, the chances of it going up by 20% just to break even in basically the next 4 years, not that likely in my book. I mean, it's possible, definitely possible. You've got to look as well, I guess, at the deflation or the inflation of currency, I suppose, the devaluation of currency, that's what I was trying to say, over time as well, and perhaps you'd be best served to lock that cash up right now. But I just don't feel that the risk is worth the reward, and there are other ways that you could look to accumulate that gold over time, which would probably end up with an approximate same amount of gold over the 4 years, with perhaps even a cheaper price for the gold over the next 4 years. So I just don't see it as a real kind of viable business opportunity. And my sort of analytical brain will always look at things almost as a little bit of a, business side of things. That's one of the things I've always been very good at. I look at the risk, the reward, the potential returns over time, what it would be. The liabilities is the big thing here. So borrowing money, borrowing cash to buy gold and silver, the biggest thing is your liability. Now, if you borrow £10,000, that's quite a chunk of change. The original, I guess we're going to call him the Inquisitor, the person who asked the question, I replied and said, I don't think that's a good idea. And they said, but why not? I said, well, it's the liability. It's the risk about the loan. What happens if you can't make the repayments over time? Oh, I've got a very stable job. It's fine. Is there really anything such as a stable job in this world right now? My opinion is no. I mean, there are good jobs where it's very, very unlikely that you might not have that job. But realistically, there's always still a risk, and I don't feel that that's an appropriate level of risk to be taking, certainly when you have £10,000 worth of liability. Now, that's a lot of money, and it's not necessarily something that's really very practical for a lot of people to have that debt liability for. £233 a month in repayments doesn't seem like a bank-breaking amount to go out. Certainly for some people, if you've got that affordable income, then sure, you can afford £233 a month on top of what other, monthly outgoings you might have. But what about in the next 4 years if something changes in your life? What happens if you are injured, or you have an accident, or you can't work, or you need some additional resources there? You might not be able to take out another loan. What happens if you wanted to buy a house and that £10,000 loan stands against you on your credit rating, because when the bank asks you, what did you take that £10,000 loan out for? And you go, oh, I bought a bunch of gold with it. Right, okay, yeah, that's pretty frivolous spending. And that is the honest truth. Like, banks don't necessarily like it when you spend a lot of money. And so the fact that you've got already a £233 monthly outgoing might stand you against getting future credit on various things that you might need if you were down that route. Now, I'm very much a fan of not being in debt at all, and the fact of being in debt on its own, I guess, would be a lot for a fair amount of my viewership. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who would absolutely hate the idea of being in debt when buying gold and silver. We're not even factoring in the potential interest rates. I'd be amazed if it's a loan that's a fixed rate loan that doesn't potentially change with interest rates, then that's something, but you'll probably be paying more for that than you would if you got a variable right now. But of course, the idea is that there would be, interest rate rises over time, so perhaps you're okay. But generally speaking, I would say interest rates are something to be concerned about if you have any kind of debt right now. What happens if you just really can't meet those interest repayments that are coming up? I've seen so many headlines about people who can't afford their mortgages, and mortgages are one of the most affordable ways to borrow money at all. So there are just these questions in my mind about the risks and liabilities that do not make sense to take on board at all. And the whole point of gold and silver is being this, this independent financial institution upon yourself. You are not beholden to others. You're not beholden to cash, to money, to any lenders out there. So to be in debt to somebody over the gold and silver that you own seems a little bit strange in my books. Now, with that said, there are exceptions, I guess, to when I would personally buy gold and silver on credit. There is certainly an argument to be had for buying gold and silver on a credit card. Very important to check with the provider and the institution that you're buying from, because sometimes you'll get charged cash withdrawal fees and interest rates when you buy gold and silver. I've seen a few people fall foul of that, even with places like the Royal Mint. So definitely worth checking with your providers, but they give you a level of protection which is higher. Of course, free credit for a month is usually what happens on most credit cards. So there are exceptions where buying on credit is okay. But generally speaking, in my opinion, you should be trying to reduce as many of the monthly outgoings as you've got in your life to get that more cash. And here's the big crux. Here's the quintessential flaw in the argument of this individual. And I've got some brown paper out to do the maths. Now, if you've got a budget that you can afford, like this person said, they can afford quite easily to pay $233 per month in repayments. That's fine. Okay, great. Now, £233 a month. Every 2 months, you're buying a sovereign, essentially, or you can buy a half sovereign every month. Over a 4-year term is 48 months. So you could probably buy 24 sovereigns quite happily and have some change. You'd probably buy a few more after that as well. So easily you can match those buying figures across that year. Now, if we remember that we need to do this. 12,000 is the total repayable for the £10,000 loan. So we start with 10,000 there. So 2,000 is the target here. Could you buy £2,000 worth of gold extra? Could you end up spending that £12,000 on gold across that 4-year period? My argument would be yes. If you're spending £233 a month financing the loan, why not just use the £233 a month to buy that gold? And then at the end of that term, you would have £12,000 worth of gold Now, of course, some of the gold that you buy earlier on will hopefully have increased in value and so on and so on. But the point here is that you'll end up with more gold than you would for the £10,000. Now, look, it is dependent somewhat on gold prices, but to get £12,000 worth here, gold's going to have to go up by 20% across that 4-year period. Is that something that's likely, feasible, possible? Well, to a certain extent, yes. If you look at the fact that inflation is still high right now, 8, 9, 10%, over a year, this is a 4-year loan, remember, you could theoretically lose 30, 40% of the financial buying power of your cash. But in this example, it's not your cash. You've used somebody else's cash to buy it. So it's not like you've got £10,000 of your own money stuck in the bank that in 4 years' time will be worth the buying power of £7,000. You're borrowing this up front. So you're really only working on the idea that the gold that you would buy would be worth more than 12,000 at that time. And then that's assuming that at that time you can sell that gold for the profit. Or if you just want to keep it and buy it and hold it, if you're not even going to sell it, then my argument here again is why bother spending £2,000 to buy gold up front when you could buy it slowly over time and actually get more gold for your money? Gold and silver are a long-term thing. They're not just a quick turnaround profit mechanism. And this, I feel like, is part of the problem in this modern world now. We've got too many people who think, I need the next quick fix, the next quick investment that's going to make me a bunch of cash. And unfortunately, that does come at risk because people then go overboard and they think, well, look, it's the GameStop. It's the GameStop sort of generation, the Wall Street bets generation. It's just not practical. And there's one huge thing that I haven't even talked about. There are some people, not this gentleman, he didn't mention it in this one, but there are some people who think that borrowing right now is fine because when the currencies around the world collapse, your loan's not going to be worth anything. Now, as I said, inflation is a thing and it will devalue currency over time and essentially mean that you're paying back less in buying power. But I really don't think that you should rely on the fall of a currency if you've borrowed so much cash. It's just something that's not clever. And if you're gonna take those risks in life, you need to be prepared for those risks to come true. And I just don't think enough people out there take that consideration seriously. It's just prudent to plan. And yeah, I don't think borrowing money to buy gold and silver is a prudent idea. If you really want, and this is as close to kind of life advice as I will ever give, I'm going to call it life advice rather than financial advice, but what I did 15 years ago, and what Mrs. Backyard Bullion did as well 15 years ago when we first met, was we took a long, hard look at our combined finances and what we buy, what we spend, what we use money for, and what we had for borrowing. Both had a bit of student debt and stuff as well. So we looked at all of that and we thought about what we want to achieve with our life. And so it was just shred down those expenses, take away all of those things that you don't really need in your life. You don't need to have a flash car. You don't need to live in a 5-bedroom mansion. Surely you can just get by in a little tiny house or a flat. You can have not the latest iPhone. You don't need to necessarily have all of those subscriptions to various different, streaming platforms and stuff. Just look how often you watch things. Like, how often do you honestly go and watch various different platforms? We skip in between different ones. We have them for a few months, watch what we want. The next one we come on, we have what we want. It's that simple premise. And it might not sound like a lot, saving sort of £8 a month here, £7 a month there, or whatever it might be. But, we have been able to really save money. And that's really important, like super important for anybody out there in this world. Be as debt-free as possible. The exception is, of course, mortgages. If you don't have that cash up front to buy a house to live in, most people in this world don't. We would have to go down a route of a mortgage, and that is, in my opinion, one of the most affordable ways to borrow money. It has to be done sensibly because, of course, the liability here is your place to live, which is pretty important, we might add. And what I would say is, before buying any gold and silver, have a really good long think about whether or not you can afford to pay extra on mortgages to pay it down sooner. The more or the longer you borrow money for, the more it costs you is the essential thing here. You know, buying things like phone contracts or new phones on contract. You know, every time we've wanted to get a new phone, for example, we'll get something that's, you know, a few years older. The model will buy the handset outright. Saves so much money. It really does over a long period of time. You know, even simple things like cutting our own hair. Like, it might sound alien to some people out there, but the amount of money that you save over 10, 15 years. I did the maths the other day. You know, if I had a haircut every 2 months across 10, I think it's 10 years now that we've been cutting my hair, for example, you know, it saves so much money. Call it £15 a haircut. You know, times 6, you're probably looking at least £90 a year, if not 100. Let's call it £100 a year. We saved £1,000. That's, you know, back 5 years ago, an ounce of gold. So, yeah. Listen, I've rambled on way longer than I expected here, and it is a bit of a ranty moan about money and savings and loans, and I just don't think it's a good idea. Now, look, I am always ready to be stood corrected, like a man with an orthopaedic shoe, but I think it's going to be a hard argument to convince me otherwise. However, if you have got an argument to present to me, I'd love to hear it down in that comment section. It's one of the reasons why I do the style of video that I do. A big personal thank you to all my backyard bullion ramblers who've sat through 16 minutes of my waffling. I really do appreciate all of you. You're in the extra super cool kids club if you've listened to 16 minutes, especially if you got my man with the orthopedic shoe joke. Let me know if you enjoyed that little bit of sense of humour down in the comments. It's always great to hear from you guys. Thank you. Otherwise, that's it from me. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you all for watching. And as always, please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.